So imagine you have like just a few days to distill an entire human life down to a single piece of paper.
Right, a few days.
Yeah, literally days. You've got decades of memories, quiet triumphs, chaotic family vacations, profound heartbreaks, all of it. And your primary tool to accomplish this monumentally devastating task is, everyday office software.
Something completely mundane.
Exactly, something like Microsoft Publisher.
Yeah.
It sounds almost absurd when you frame it that way, right? Because usually when we think about a container, there's this strict expectation of pure utility. Form follows function.
Sure, like a cardboard box holds books. A
Yeah.
ceramic mug holds your morning coffee.
Right. It's just geometry and materials, highly practical, but entirely devoid of emotion.
It holds the object or it fails. I mean, there's no middle ground there. And there's certainly no, narrative arc to a coffee mug.
No, exactly. But then you shift your perspective, right? And you consider a container like a locket,
Wow.
a time capsule.
Oh, yeah. That changes the context entirely.
Suddenly, that container isn't just holding a physical object anymore. It's protecting something sacred. The way you open it, the tactile weight of it in your hand, the small mechanical click of the clasp, all of that matters just as much as the photograph tucked inside.
The physical object essentially becomes a ritual in itself.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is exactly where we find ourselves today.
We are looking at a container that is technically constructed from, nothing more than processed wood pulp and printer toner.
Yeah.
Yet it's engineered to hold the sheer weight of human legacy.
So whether you're a seasoned graphic designer looking to understand the nuances of physical formatting, or maybe someone who has suddenly heartbreakingly been tasked with honoring a loved one, or just deeply curious learner, someone fascinated by the strange intersection of rigid technical design and raw human emotion.
Huh.
If that's you, you are in the exact right place.
Absolutely.
Today's deep dive is venturing into the highly specific art of desktop publishing and memorialization. We're anchoring this whole conversation in a set of really specialized excerpts from a guide. It's called Mastering the 8-Panel Gatefold Memorial Layout, and it's provided by the Funeral Program site.
And our core mission today is to pull back the curtain on how a highly technical, seemingly intimidating design format, the 8-panel gatefold, actually serves as a powerful vehicle for immersive storytelling.
Right, because this isn't just a software tutorial.
Not at all. We're moving far beyond a standard software manual here. What we're really unpacking is how the physical geometry of a piece of paper directly dictates the emotional experience of the person holding it.
I was entirely captivated by this source material. I mean, we're talking about using digital grids, margin calculations, bleed settings, all this dry text stuff to navigate one of the most profound, difficult human experiences we ever face.
Grief and remembrance.
Yeah. Grief. The text frames this specific layout, the gatefold, as a sophisticated, quote, double door to someone's life story. It really elevates the design from a mere handout to this architectural experience.
It really does.
So let's just visualize this first. For anyone listening who has never encountered this specific term in a print shop, what exactly are we holding when we say 8-panel gatefold?
Okay, let's build the physical architecture of this object in our minds. If you picture a standard, everyday informational brochure, your brain probably defaults to a bifold.
Right, like a greeting card.
Exactly. Single sheet folded cleanly in half.
Core?
Perhaps a trifold, which is the classic takeout menu format where the panels just wrap over one another in a spiral.
The takeout menu is such a great example. You just flick it open with one thumb and all the information is just immediately exposed.
Right, there's absolutely no ceremony to it.
No, you're just looking for the price of the pad thai.
Precisely. There is zero friction and therefore zero anticipation. But the 8-panel gatefold is an entirely different mechanical beast.
How so?
Well, it consists of a large, wide sheet of paper. And the two outer edges of this wide sheet are scored and folded inward so that they meet perfectly flush right at the absolute center line of the document.
Okay, so they meet in the middle.
Yes. These are your two outer panels. Underneath those two closed doors, you have a massive interior canvas.
Why?
When you pull those two outer panels open, they unfold outward, revealing the inside.
And because of how it's folded, we end up with 8 distinct canvases to work with, right?
Exactly. 4 vertical panels on the inside spread, making up that grand interior mural, and 4 panels on the reverse side.
Which create the front covers and the back covers when the whole thing is closed up.
You've got it.
It feels incredibly architectural. When I first grasped the mechanics of this, the immediate image that came to my mind was like walking up to a set of heavy, ornate French doors.
Oh, that's a perfect comparison.
Or like sitting in a theater waiting for a massive velvet curtain to part. There's something hardwired into human psychology about an opening mechanism that splits perfectly in the middle and pulls away to the sides.
It inherently signals to the brain to stop what you're doing and pay attention.
Yes. It says, something of great importance is about to be revealed.
The double door presentation is not just an aesthetic quirk. It is a calculated psychological trigger. The structure inherently creates a layered narrative.
A layered narrative, unlike the takeout menu.
Exactly. With that standard bifold or the menu, the information is instantly exposed. The designer has no control over where your eye goes first. You open the cover, and boom, you are hit with a wall of text.
Right, it's overwhelming.
But the gatefold format demands a sequenced interaction. It actively forces a timeline onto the reader.
A sequenced interaction. It's almost like a choreographed dance for your hands and your eyes, dictated entirely by the paper.
Break down the psychology of that sequence, right? The designer actually has to anticipate the viewer's emotional journey step by step.
Okay, walk me through that.
Step 1. The viewer is handed the closed program. They encounter the cover. It's quiet. It's introductory. It's usually just a single dignified portrait, a name, and a set of dates.
So it's a moment of grounding. You're sitting there in a pew or maybe a folding chair at a memorial service, and you're holding this heavy closed object. You're just taking a breath.
Right. Then comes step 2. The viewer actively chooses to open those outer panels. They perform the physical action of parting the double doors.
The transition.
This is the transition. And finally, step 3. The grand reveal of the full 4-panel interior spread. This step-by-step progression actively builds anticipation and emotional engagement.
So the viewer isn't just passively looking at a piece of paper.
No, they're physically participating in the uncovering of a memory.
Wow. It transforms a static, flat piece of paper into an interactive spatial experience. And, in a moment of acute grief, the pacing of that information has to be so vital.
Critical.
Because overwhelming a grieving family member or a friend with a dense, chaotic wall of text and dozens of photos all at once, that can be incredibly jarring.
The brain is already overloaded with emotion. It does not need visual overload on top of it.
Right. So the gatefold structure introduces a sense of gentle pacing. It basically says, here's the cover. Take your time. When you are ready, open the doors.
Which brings us perfectly to the tactile dimension of the design. We live in this era of completely frictionless digital consumption.
Oh, yeah. Swiping on glass all day.
We swipe glass screens with our thumbs. There's no physical resistance.
Mm-hmm.
But the physical motion of having to put both hands on a heavy piece of paper, gently grasp those two center edges and pull them outward, it forces a physical deceleration.
It acts as a cognitive speed bump.
That's a great way to put it.
You literally cannot mindlessly scroll a gatefold. You have to engage both hands.
The physical interaction reinforces the emotional connection. The object becomes a sensory experience. You're feeling the subtle texture of the paper stock. You're performing a deliberate physical action to open it. And that action physically mirrors the emotional weight of accessing those memories.
The design of the container honors the contents. But, and this is a massive but, all of that profound poetry, all of that dignified unfolding and beautiful sequencing, it falls completely apart if the doors don't actually close.
Oh, it's a disaster if the mechanics fail.
Which brings us to the invisible, often frustrating framework holding all this emotion together.
Right. The transition from the conceptual beauty of the fold to the intense, rigid, mathematical precision required to actually manufacture it.
Because if the technical side fails, the emotional payoff is just ruined.
Completely.
If you hand someone a memorial program and the paper is buckling, or the center doors overlap and won't lie flat, or they spring open awkwardly because the paper is basically fighting its own geometry,
That instantly shatters the dignity of the piece.
it turns a beautiful tribute into, like, a cheap, poorly made craft project.
The emotional response we just outlined, that seamless, respectful unfolding, is entirely dependent on an invisible digital framework that the reader must never know exists. The software becomes the hidden scaffolding.
Okay, let's get into that software, because this is where it gets crazy. We're talking about desktop publishing programs, specifically tools like Microsoft Publisher.
Right.
When you open a blank document to create one of these, you aren't just typing onto a white page. You have to define the full, massive spread size. You have to account for bleed areas. You have to establish incredibly precise guides.
Those guides are the literal architectural skeleton of the tribute. Before a single photograph is imported, before a single letter of an obituary is typed, the designer must construct the mathematical grid.
The invisible lines.
Yes, these non-printing guidelines. They mark the exact locations of the fold lines and the boundaries of every single panel. They're the guardrails that ensure every element falls into its designated space once the physical folding happens.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here because when I first tried to visualize setting up this grid on a screen, the geometry seemed incredibly simple to me. Yeah, like elementary school math, really. If I have a wide piece of paper, let's say it's an 11 by 17-inch sheet, and I want an 8-panel layout, which means 4 vertical panels across the inside spread.
Right, 4 panels.
Shouldn't every single panel just be exactly the same width? You take the total width of 17 inches, divide it by 4, draw your guidelines at exactly 4.25 inches each, and you're done. Perfectly symmetrical. Why does the software setup need to be this complex, intimidating process?
And that assumption right there is the exact trap that catches almost everyone who attempts a gatefold without specialized knowledge.
Really? Because it seems like simple, flawless division.
It does seem that way. But doing that completely ignores the physical reality of the medium. We are not designing for a flat screen. We are designing for physical matter. This brings up the crucial physics of paper.
The physics of paper, meaning paper isn't just a two-dimensional concept.
Exactly. Paper has thickness.
Even paper.
Even thin paper takes up microscopic space, but the heavy premium cardstock used for memorials takes up significant space when folded.
Ah.
If you mathematically divide that 17-inch sheet into 4 perfectly equal 4.25-inch panels, the design will fail the absolute moment you try to fold it.
Wait, because the inner panels have to fit inside the outer panels when it's closed?
Yes. Think about the mechanics of the fold. When you fold the 2 outer panels inward to close those double doors, the outer panels literally wrap around the inner panels.
Right.
The fold itself consumes a fraction of an inch of the paper. If the inner panels are the exact same width as the outer panels, the edges of those inner panels will violently collide with the inside hinge of the outer fold.
Because they're trying to occupy the exact same physical space.
Precisely.
So the inner panels will hit the crease. Because there's no room for them, the paper has nowhere to go but out. It will bow outward. It will buckle.
The brochure will refuse to sit flat. The doors will pop open. It will look lopsided and, honestly, amateurish.
That's awful.
To prevent this, the designer must employ a highly specific technical secret. The inner panels must actually be slightly narrower than the outer panels.
Wait, how much narrower are we talking? Fractions of an inch.
Usually about a 1/16 to an 1/8 of an inch narrower, depending on the exact thickness of the paper stock you're using.
Wow.
The designer has to use careful measurement within the software to create custom margin guides that reflect these subtle asymmetrical differences.
So the inner panels are intentionally designed to be fractionally smaller.
Yes, so they tuck neatly and invisibly inside the outer panels, honoring the physics of the fold.
It's literal margin magic. You are digitally designing empty space to compensate for the invisible physical thickness of the paper stock. That is an astonishing level of precision.
And aligning the content within these custom asymmetrical margins is what ensures that the text and images remain perfectly centered within their panels once the physical object is folded.
Because if your digital margin is off by even a millimeter,
a letter of someone's name might fall right into the deep crease of the fold, making it completely illegible.
which is incredibly frustrating. We've all printed like a homemade birthday card or a bake sale flyer only to fold it and realize a crucial piece of text was entirely swallowed by the crease.
It happens all the time.
And it's annoying for a bake sale flyer, but for a memorial document, losing a piece of someone's legacy to a bad fold is just unacceptable.
It demands an obsessive level of precision from the very first click in the software.
Okay, so we've built this invisible, mathematically sound structural framework. We've conquered the physics of the paper, and we know our inner panels are safely tucked away. Now we have to actually paint this canvas.
The fun part.
Let's transition to the imagery, specifically that massive interior spread that is unlocked when those gatefold doors are opened.
This interior spread is the emotional reward for the viewer. They have completed the sequenced physical interaction, they've respectfully opened the doors, and now they are presented with a sweeping, uninterrupted view.
A 4-panel wide canvas. When I think about filling a space that wide, my mind immediately goes to panoramic photography.
Oh, absolutely.
Using a single continuous image that stands across all the interior panels, like a continuous mural wrapping around a room.
It is a breathtaking visual effect when executed correctly. An expansive landscape, perhaps a place the person loved, or a carefully sequenced collage of images that flows seamlessly from left to right.
It provides a unique, immersive storytelling opportunity that a standard, chopped-up bifold simply cannot offer.
It really does.
But sticking with that mural analogy for a second, imagine you hire a painter to paint a continuous landscape across 4 separate wall panels in a room.
Okay.
If they paint the horizon line on panel 2 just a fraction of an inch higher than the horizon line on panel 3, the entire illusion is instantly broken.
Instantly.
Your eye will completely ignore the beautiful mountains and trees. It will zero in exclusively on that broken, misaligned horizon.
The human eye is incredibly adept at spotting broken patterns. Evolutionarily, we're built for it. So the precision required to scale and align a digital image so it flows seamlessly over those fold lines is immense.
Because you're placing an image across areas that will be physically creased by a machine.
Exactly. The digital placement has to be flawless to account for that physical disruption.
Which is why the source material is absolutely militant about using high-resolution files. You can't just grab a tiny thumbnail photo from someone's old Facebook page and stretch it across an 11 by 17-inch canvas.
No. Stretching an image forces the software to guess at the missing data. If you use a low-resolution image and stretch it across 4 panels, the image will immediately pixelate.
It gets all blocky.
Right. It'll look blurry, blocky, and full of digital artifacts.
We call that DPI, right? Dots per inch.
Correct. For a standard computer screen, 72 dots per inch looks perfectly fine. But a physical printer requires at least 300 dots per inch to render a crisp, clean image.
So if you stretch a 72 DPI image to fit a gatefold,
Those dots become massive, blurry squares. High-resolution files are strictly necessary to maintain clarity and sharpness.
and a blurry, pixelated photo on a memorial program isn't just a technical design flaw, it unconsciously feels disrespectful.
It really does.
It feels like an afterthought, like you didn't care enough to find a good photo.
Exactly.
So how do we maintain overall visual harmony across such a massive spread? Because realistically, it's rarely just one giant panoramic photo. A family is going to want different sections.
Usually.
They'll have an obituary here, an order service there, maybe a poem on panel 4, and a collage of smaller photos on panel 1.
There's a lot of varied information.
Right, and the viewer's eye is taking in all 4 of these disparate panels simultaneously upon that grand reveal. How do you stop it from looking like a chaotic bulletin board?
The unifying power of color and texture is the glue that holds a gatefold together here. Consistency and design cohesion are paramount.
Because the format inherently involves multiple distinct sections.
Right, so any unintended variation in color or style completely disrupts the viewing experience.
It's like if the background of panel 2 is a slightly different shade of blue than the background of panel 3.
The brain registers it as a printing error. It looks like 2 entirely different documents were accidentally glued together.
Oh, wow.
To combat this, the designer must rely on specific, unifying techniques. Strictly defined color palettes, subtle gradients, and continuous background textures or patterns.
So they act as a bridge.
Yes, these elements bridge the physical gaps between the panels. They create a continuous visual environment.
So if panel 2 is dense with the text of an obituary, and panel 3 is entirely visual with a photo collage, putting a very subtle, continuous gradient, maybe fading from a soft silver to a warm cream, behind both of those panels tricks the brain.
That's a great example.
It tells the viewer, despite the different content, this is one cohesive story.
Exactly. It allows the individual sections of content to pop and be easily readable while maintaining that unified, mural-like feel of the overall object.
Images and backgrounds are one challenge, but handling the actual written history of a person introduces a completely different set of problems.
Typography is a whole other beast.
Right. How do you handle decades of written history, dates, names, and memories? Let's look at the typography and the information architecture of the gatefold.
Mapping out where specific content lives across 8 distinct zones requires severe intentionality. The information architecture must guide the reader logically.
And the structural flow usually dictates that the outer panels, the closed doors, feature the cover title, a primary portrait, and perhaps a short, meaningful quote on the back.
It's the introduction and the conclusion.
The inner panels are reserved for the heavier, denser text, right? The detailed order of service for the funeral, the comprehensive obituary, written dreams from family, acknowledgments.
But placing that text is where the science of typography really comes in. The gatefold format allows for incredible creative placement, but readability must remain the absolute priority.
Because we have to consider the environment.
We absolutely must consider the environment in which this document will be read.
People are going to be reading this in a dimly lit church or a crowded memorial hall. They might be older with failing eyesight. And crucially, they're likely going to be reading this through tears.
The cognitive load of processing grief is immense. The physical act of reading should not add to their stress.
Which is why the mechanics of typography, specifically kerning and leading, are critical tools here.
Remind the listener what those are.
Right. So kerning is the adjustment of horizontal space between individual letters. Leading is the vertical space between lines of text.
If the leading is too tight, the lines of text basically crash into each other. It looks like a dense, intimidating block of gray on the page.
And the eye gets lost trying to track from the end of one line back to the beginning of the next.
Exactly. And if the kerning is off, letters bleed together, creating optical illusions and making names hard to decipher.
That's the worst.
Adjusting these elements creates a polished, professional look that guides the reader naturally. Proper leading gives the text room to breathe vertically, reducing eye strain and lowering the cognitive load required to read the words.
But this brings up a massive psychological conflict for anyone designing a memorial.
Oh, the urge to include everything.
Yes. When you're tasked with summarizing an entire human life in a single printed document, the absolute overwhelming natural impulse is to cram every single photo, every single funny quote, every single achievement, and every memory into every available square inch of those 8 panels.
It's so common.
I mean, you have this massive canvas. The person meant so much to you. Why on earth would you leave any of it blank?
It is the most common, understandable, and dangerous impulse a grieving family faces when designing these programs.
Dangerous.
Well, aesthetically dangerous. The fear of leaving something out translates into a panicked desire to fill every void. But the design principles explicitly warn against this. Giving into the temptation to fill every space destroys the readability and the dignity of the piece. This is where we must introduce the profound importance of white space.
White space, or negative space, right? The empty areas on the page where absolutely nothing is printed.
Think about the mechanism of how the human eye tracks across a page. The eye moves in quick jumps called saccades, and it stops to process information during fixations.
Okay.
If a page is crammed edge to edge with text and photos, the eye has nowhere to rest. The brain becomes overwhelmed by the sheer volume of stimuli.
So more stuff actually means less comprehension.
Yes, the reader actually absorbs less information because they are stressed by the clutter.
It's like walking into a hoarder's house versus walking into a high-end art museum.
Oh, I like that.
In the museum, a single brilliant painting is hung on a massive blank white wall. The blank wall isn't wasted space, it's the frame that forces you to focus entirely on the art.
Right.
The blank space tells your brain, this single item is incredibly important, look only at this.
That is a brilliant analogy. White space is a functional design tool. It is not empty space, it is active space.
Active space.
Leaving areas intentionally open around the text and photos enhances readability and comprehension. Furthermore, white space inherently contributes to a sense of elegance, balance, and most importantly for a memorial, dignity.
Because if every inch is covered in text, overlapping photos, and clip art, it doesn't look like a dignified tribute to a respected life.
It looks like a chaotic, frantic scrapbook.
It feels rushed.
Restraint is the hallmark of professional design. By using white space strategically, you give the memories room to breathe, you provide the viewer with visual moments of pause.
It's exactly like music, isn't it?
How do you mean?
The profound emotional impact of a symphony doesn't come from every instrument playing constantly as loud as possible.
No, of course not.
The impact comes from the deliberate pauses, the silence between the notes. The white space on the paper is the visual silence that gives the words and photos their emotional resonance.
Beautifully put. So we have mathematically perfected our margins. We have seamlessly aligned our high-resolution panoramic images across the folds. We have meticulously kerned our typography, and we have bravely embraced the dignity of white space.
The digital file is flawless.
It's perfect.
But a flawless digital file on a computer screen cannot be handed to a grieving family member.
No, it cannot.
We have to pull this abstract digital creation out of the ether and bring it into the harsh physical reality of the real world. Let's talk about production. The transition from screen to hands.
This is where the physical keepsake is actually born, and where all our previous digital work is truly tested.
Because all of that beautiful white space and perfectly kerned text is completely worthless if you print it on the wrong material, which introduces an entirely new physics problem.
The physical material itself.
We mentioned paper thickness earlier regarding the folds, but what kind of paper are we actually supposed to use for something this complex?
The standard recommendation for a premium gatefold is an 80-pound cover stock.
Okay, why specifically 80 pound? Why can't I just buy a ream of standard cheap printer paper from the office supply store and run off 200 copies?
If we return to the tactile experience, paperweight is everything. Standard home printer paper is usually 20-pound stock.
Right.
It's flimsy, it's highly translucent, meaning you print heavy ink on one side, you can see the ghost of it bleeding through to the other side, and it holds absolutely no structural integrity.
So if you try to create a massive 17-inch wide 8-panel gatefold out of 20-pound paper,
It will immediately flop over when you hold it. It'll feel like a wet noodle.
and people are going to be interacting with this object. They're going to open and close it during the service. They'll pass it down the pew to an aunt. They'll fold it up, put it in a suit jacket pocket or a purse, and perhaps keep it in a wooden memory box for decades.
20-pound paper will tear, crumple, and degrade almost immediately. An 80-pound cover stock is a durable heavyweight. It gives the brochure a rigid architectural structure.
It stands up under its own weight. It provides that crucial subconscious weight in the hand. When you hand someone a heavy 80-pound cardstock, their sensory receptors immediately send a signal to their brain. This object has mass, therefore this object has value. Handle this with respect.
It fundamentally elevates the perceived importance of the information printed on it.
But this brings up a very real mechanical problem.
Oh, yes, it does.
If I take a thick, rigid piece of 80-pound cover stock and try to aggressively fold it in half by hand at my kitchen table, the paper fights back.
It resists the fold.
And worse, the thick layer of toner or ink sitting on top of the paper cracks. You end up with this ugly, jagged white line running right down the spine of your beautiful dark blue memorial cover where the ink has literally shattered off the folded paper fibers.
Which is a devastating result after hours of design work. Heavy cover stock cannot simply be folded by hand. It must be professionally scored.
Scored, meaning you have to compress the paper before you fold it.
Yes. A machine must press a physical crease into the paper fibers, weakening them in a perfectly straight line so that when the paper is folded, it bends smoothly at the score line without cracking the heavy ink layer on top.
So this highlights the difference between a home inkjet printer and professional production, which brings us to another terrifying mechanical reality of printing. The fact that commercial printers are giant, vibrating machines with high-speed mechanical rollers.
They are not delicate instruments.
Which leads us to the concept of bleeds and trim marks.
A bleed is a critical printing concept. It occurs when your digital background color, or a panoramic image, is designed to extend slightly beyond the actual final finished edge of the physical document.
Wait, why would I design something to be larger than the paper it's actually printed on?
Because printers are not flawless magic boxes. They are mechanical devices pulling sheets of paper through high-speed rollers. As the paper flies through the machine, it can shift slightly, maybe a 1/16 of an inch up or down.
Oh.
If you design your beautiful full-page photo to stop exactly at the mathematical edge of your digital canvas, and the physical paper shifts by 1 millimeter during printing,
Oh, no.
what happens?
You end up with a glaring, bright, white sliver of unprinted paper running all the way down the edge of your dark, moody photograph.
Exactly. The white sliver of death.
The white sliver of death. It instantly ruins the illusion of edge-to-edge printing.
To combat this mechanical shifting, a designer must set up a bleed. They intentionally stretch the image an extra 1/8 of an inch past the intended cut line.
Oh, I see.
They also add trim marks, which are tiny crosshairs printed in the corners of the document that tell the print shop's guillotine cutter exactly where the final cut must be made.
So even if the paper shifts slightly while printing, the cutter slices through the extended image, ensuring the color runs flawlessly all the way off the edge of the final physical page. No white slivers.
Exactly. It requires deep technical foresight. And because of all these variables, the buckling paper physics, the shifting printer rollers, the resolution of the photos, the cracking of the ink, there is an absolute necessity for test prints.
Because you cannot trust a glowing computer screen to tell you the truth about a physical object. A screen will lie to you.
A screen does not have thickness, it does not have texture, and it does not fold. You must print a physical test copy, physically score it, fold it, and verify the alignment in 3 dimensions.
Checking all the details.
Do the outer double doors meet perfectly in the absolute center without overlapping? Does the panoramic mountain range line up seamlessly across the 3 interior fold lines? Is the text readable in a standard room's lighting?
You have to make these micro adjustments before you hit the button to run the final batch of 100 or 200 copies. This iterative workflow, printing, testing, adjusting, printing again, it's exhausting, but it's the only way to achieve that flawless final result.
A perfect gatefold is almost never achieved on the first attempt. It requires patience and a willingness to refine the math.
Now, I'm listening to us describe this process, and if I am a grieving family member who just wants a beautiful program for my mother's service on Thursday, I am terrified right now.
Sounds like a lot.
I do not have time to learn the physics of paper margins, calculate 1/8 of an inch bleed extensions, and run iterative testing cycles on a commercial printer. It sounds like an insurmountable mountain of friction during the worst week of someone's life.
It really does. But this is exactly where the value of dedicated resources comes in. The source material highlights the role of platforms like the funeral program site.
They exist specifically to remove that friction, don't they?
They do. They act as a bridge, allowing individuals without formal graphic design degrees to achieve deeply professional, dignified results.
By providing customizable templates. But we aren't just talking about a template that has pretty fonts. We are talking about templates that solve the terrifying physics problems we just spent the last 20 minutes discussing.
Exactly. When you use a specialized gatefold template, that highly complex margin magic is already mathematically baked into the file.
It's already done for you.
The inner panels are already correctly formatted to be fractions of an inch narrower. The bleed lines are pre-established. The safety zones for the text are locked in.
Wow.
The user does not have to invent the geometry from scratch. They simply drag their photos and type their text into a framework that inherently understands the physics of folded paper.
It's a profound psychological relief. It allows the grieving family to focus entirely on the emotional work, curating the memories, choosing the perfect photos, writing the legacy, rather than having a panic attack over margin calculations in Microsoft Publisher at 2 in the morning.
The template absorbs the technical burden, so the family can focus on the emotional tribute.
And these tools also provide digital preview modes, right?
Yes, digital preview modes and alignment guides within the software, helping catch glaring errors before that crucial first physical test print. It empowers the creator with confidence.
We have covered an incredible amount of ground today. We started with the conceptual, architectural majesty of the double doors.
We did.
We waded through the rigorous, almost punishing math of asymmetrical margins and paper thickness. We explored how to seamlessly paint a panoramic visual canvas across structural folds. We embraced the quiet dignity of typographic white space. And finally, we wrestled the digital file into the heavy physical reality of 80-pound cover stock and commercial bleeds.
It is a remarkable journey for a single piece of printed paper. What begins as a blank digital canvas transforms into a highly engineered, deeply emotional physical artifact.
To synthesize the core takeaway for you listening, mastering the 8-panel gatefold layout is a delicate, intricate dance between cold, rigid, technical precision and profound human expression.
The elegant emotion is impossible without the hidden math.
Right. It's the absolute technical perfection, the seamless folds, the flawless bleeds, the invisible margins, that elevates this object from a simple, cheap handout into a dynamic, interactive statement of profound respect and enduring dedication.
The care, the time, and the obsessive precision invested in the technical alignment directly translates, in the hands of the mourner, to the deep care shown for the loved one's memory. The perfection of the object honors the person.
And that leaves me with a broader final concept to ponder, something I want to leave you, the listener, with today.
What's that?
We spend the vast majority of our waking lives consuming information on flat, frictionless digital screens. We swipe past thousands of photos a day with a flick of our thumbs. We scroll through endless oceans of text without a second thought.
We barely register it.
It takes zero physical effort, and because of that lack of friction, we rarely retain any of it. But consider how the physical weight, the rich texture of the heavy stock, and the deliberately sequenced physical unfolding of a well-designed, tangible object fundamentally alters the way our brains process information.
It changes everything.
Does the actual physical effort required by both of our hands to slowly open those paper double doors force our minds to slow down? Does it force us to value and internalize the memory hidden inside more deeply than a digital swipe ever could?
That's a really powerful question.
It's something to deeply consider regarding the enduring, irreplaceable power of physical media in a digital age, especially when it comes to preserving human memory. We started this whole deep dive by talking about simple containers, boxes, and mugs.
Right, pure utility.
But it turns out when you engineer a container with this much intention, with this much technical mastery, and with this much profound dignity, the container itself ceases to be just a vessel. The container becomes an inseparable part of the tribute.
It becomes a physical manifestation of the love left behind.
Exactly. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the hidden design of the physical world around you, and we will catch you next time.